Welcome to Nox Spellenzolder, and this time I want to take a look at The Adventures in Neverland, published by Black Box Adventures. It's a game for 2 to 4 players and it takes about 60 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a typical adventure game. In this game every player takes upon the role of one of the most famous characters in the Peter Pan universe. And you're going to play through your own unique story, which will wind and twist among a branched path line, and every choice you make will affect in some way the final result of your story. The objective of the game is to be the one with the most adventure points at the end of the game, and do keep in mind that the game I'm about to show you is still a prototype, so the components and rules may still change. But let's have a look at what's inside the box. The game is developed by Vicky Spheres and we get the rules. As I said before, this is a prototype, so I printed them myself and my printer has some yellow problems. But the rule book itself is easy to understand, with explanations, setup, everything, with nice depictions and color codes, so easy to read through. We get the different characters. Each character has their own components and they all have a unique set of cards which together form their storybook. And what's nice about these character decks is if you choose this character, this is the adventure you're gonna have, but you don't know how the story is gonna go, because every yellow banner you see depicts one of the chapters within the story, but every chapter provides you with a couple of choices, and whatever choice you make refers you to the next chapter, so you will be skipping certain chapters. There are even chapters which have choices up to the letter F, so you get 6 different choices. So in one playthrough you will never see the whole story. It's always going to branch left, right. And at the end of this deck there are a couple of unique cards which are character specific, which you might obtain during the game. Furthermore, we get the side quest deck, we get the item deck, we get wounded markers for the characters that come along with the main characters, we get the happening deck. We have, again, it's a prototype, not all miniatures are complete, but we have 4 miniatures for 4 of the characters in the game. And we have the crocodile, and every character has their own player board, and it's shaped like a book, very nice. It depicts your base stats with which you start, your special abilities, and it has room for your inventory and side quest. We have some common markers and of course the main board, which depicts Neverland, the world of Peter Pan, with the scoring track, the adventure point track, the events, the special locations, and room for all the different piles of cards. So that's what we get. Let's set up a game. And this is how we set up the game in my example for 2 players. Every player chooses a character. You get your player character board with your which keeps your special abilities and your stats in the 5 different scores with their starting positions marked. You get your own unique markers, die, and items, and you choose which adventure you want to play, and you take the entire adventure deck corresponding with that. You get your own miniature and a adventure point scoring marker starting at 0. On the main board we place the regular items, the unique items, the happening deck. We place the crocodile and the Jolly Roger. The Jolly Roger is a non-playable character which every player can move around if no one is playing Captain Hook. And we have, of course, the wounded cards and some regular markers. Before we start playing, we need to set up the starting location for both the Jolly Roger, the Little House, and the Camp of the Braves. To do that, we're going to use the happening cards, and the happening cards have several things depicted, amongst which the different locations on the board. And you keep revealing until we have a water, a forest, and a plain location. This, for instance, is a sea location, Whale Waters. That's where the Jolly Roger will start. You find the location on the map, and that's where the Jolly Roger will start. And you do the same for the little house, which will start in a forest location, and Camp of the Braves in one of the plain locations. And because this is still a prototype, you have to know which location is which, but eventually these borders will have the matching color of the different terrain types, which makes it a lot easier. But you'll keep on drawing until you have one forest and one plain location. And finally we have to make the side quest deck, which is comprised of the neutral side quests, which have a yellow symbol on the bottom right, they're brownish, and every character has their own side quest deck. So Wendy's side quest deck is blue and Tiger Lily's side quest deck is orange. You take all these cards, you give them a thorough shuffle, and together they will form the side quest deck. And then you're ready to play. Randomly choose a starting player, and before the game actually starts, every player begins by reading their story. You just open up your storybook, like the pages in a regular book, and you start reading the story. This tells you what your character is going to do, what it faces and what's going to happen, and it also explains setup. Wendy starts in the little house, and then she has to choose either to go for option A or option B. I'm deliberately keeping this out of focus because I don't want to spoil the story for you. But you're going to choose whether you want to go for option A or option B. And option A and option B both give you another part of the story. You read it, and then you take the reward that's depicted here and you place the marker on the location that this story suggests. For instance, if I choose option A, I will get Peter's Kiss. That's one of my unique items, and I place my diamond story marker on the little house. That's where I'm at. But you'll notice that if I choose option A, I'll go to chapter 1, diamond with the 1 in it. If I choose option B, I'll go to bookmarker number 2, chapter 2. So at the start of the game I already have to choose whether I go to chapter 1 or chapter 2. So I'm already going to miss part of the story, and that's going to be going on throughout the entirety of the game. So you're not going to see everything because you make choices whether to go A or B, or even more choices. And so every player does the same thing. After setup is done, the starting player begins the game, and when it's a player's turn, they go through 2 phases. First, upkeep. And upkeep starts by revealing the top side quest card. You put it on the leftmost space, and if it's filled you move everything along to the right, and there can only be 3 active side quests. If you put down a 4th, the last one will slide off to the discard pile. Secondly, you check the color of the side quest. This one is blue, so it's a Wendy quest, and you're going to have a look whether there's a location, an event or something else that triggers when a certain color side quest is revealed. In this example, blue doesn't trigger anything. It's the normal quests, the brown ones, which will trigger the crocodile. So when you open up a side quest in that color, you grab that event and you read what happens. And finally, you're allowed to take 1 side quest. You have room for only 1, and you can pick any of those. And if you already have a side quest, you can replace yours. So you'll take the side quest you want and place yours back in the line. Side quests provide several elements. Some of them give you a one-time use bonus, for instance 2 extra movements, and others give you a chore. This one tells you to go to the Maw of the Beast location and from there move to the Nether Falls. If you do so, you'll get 1 adventure point. And this one tells you to win a challenge from Tiger Lily using your movement speed, and if you succeed you get an item. Normally if it's only a rucksack, you get an item from the item pile, but this one specifies that you get the ritual spear, so you get a specific item. But that's the first phase, that's the upkeep phase. And the second phase is the adventure phase. And in the adventure phase you have 3 actions. 1 you can spend on your own. The second one you can spend on any of the available NPCs. And the third one, you may decide whether to spend it on your character or on an NPC. The actions you can choose from are basically the same whether you choose to pick them for yourself or for an NPC, but you can choose from 5 different actions. You can move, you can interact, you can rest, you can search or track, and you can challenge. Let's have a look at them. If you want to move, you look at your movement score, which is 3 for Wendy, and that's the amount of spaces you can move. Every space counts as 1, with the exception of the water spaces. If you move into a water space, it takes up 1 of your movement points, but if you move out of a water space, it takes 2 movement points. So if you slush through several water spaces, it's going to be 2, 2, 2, 2. And there are 2 kinds of borders. Those are the hard lines, you cannot cross them, and you have like these sawtooth borders. They're one-way borders. You can only move in the direction of the teeth. So these point that way, so I can move from Maw of the Beast to Never Falls, but I cannot move from Never Falls to Maw of the Beast. So 3 movement points. Before you start moving, announce that you're going to move, and then the player to your right will take the top happening card. He's going to take a look at the symbol on the top left corner, and that depicts which terrain types activate this happening card. So if the player who's currently taking its turn is moving into a river or sea location, you're going to stop the game and you're going to tell this story. And this is a rather easy one. You just find a letter in a bottle and it gives you 1 specific item, but other happening cards will provide players with choices. You tell them a rusty sword is stuck in a stone. You discover it at the bottom of a mysterious glen. And then you're going to provide the player with options without revealing any of the successes or requirements. You're just going to tell them you've got 3 options. Option 1, you can pull it out by force. Option 2, you can wiggle it loose. And option 3, if you possess fairy dust, you might use that. Well, the player has no fairy dust, so he has to choose between pulling it loose by force or wiggling it loose. And then when they choose, you'll tell them you'll have to do either an intelligence or strength check. They roll their check, and whether they're successful or not, they get something. And these small stories only happen if the player moves into a location with the matching terrain symbol. Second action is you can rest. If you rest, you heal 2 health. If you have any companions, they provide certain bonuses. For instance, this one gives 1 strength, 1 intelligence, but they can get wounded, which means the bonus is covered up, and your movement goes down 1 because you're dragging along a wounded friend. And when you rest, you may remove all the wounded markers of cards from your companions. And finally, certain items can only be used when you exhaust them, and the rest action allows you to refresh them so you can use them again. So that's the second option, the rest action. Third action is the interact. If you're at one of the story markers, you can interact with them to progress your story. Keep in mind there are 2 kinds of story markers. You have the main story markers, which have the diamond, book and cloud shape, and you have the regular 1, 2, 3 round markers. The specific shaped story markers, the main story markers, can only be activated by the character whose color it is. So only Wendy can activate this diamond shaped one. But if there's a blue 1, for instance, somewhere, anyone who reaches the blue 1 can activate this marker and become part of that story. But if you interact with the story, you just go to the matching icon. We have Diamond 1, so we go to Chapter Diamond 1. We read this part of the story. We are presented again with a choice between A or B. We choose A or B, and then we turn it around and read A or B. And then the story continues, and we might even get all kinds of nice goodies. So that's the third option, interacting. The fourth option is either to search or track. Searching means you want to try and find some items. You're going to have a look at your search stats. My search stats is 4. I reveal the top 4 cards of the happening deck. And I'm going to look for backpack symbols. In my draw I got a 2 and a 3, which is remarkably high. It's not standard that you'll find that many, which means I find 5 items, but I can keep only 1. So in turn I'm gonna reveal the top 5 cards from the item deck, and I choose 1 to keep. The amount of items you can carry is limited. You have 2 hands, 1 set of feet, 1 torso and 1 backpack, and you can only hold a total of 5 cards, and if a card has nothing depicted you can place it anywhere you like, but it still takes up 1 spot. So this one goes in your rucksack, in your backpack, this one goes into a hand, whatever. And then there are certain items which are not useful for everybody. For instance, the razor. If you're a fairy you get +1 strength. If you're a pirate you get +1 intelligence, but I'm a Lost Boy faction character, so for Wendy this card is useless. And I'm gonna choose, well, oh, let me have the hammer. It gives me +1 strength, and when I deal damage I deal an extra damage. Alternatively you can go for tracking. Tracking is something you do when a certain quest asks you to track. For instance, if I had chosen option B on my main story, I needed to track a Lost Boy symbol in a forest. Tracking is fairly similar to searching. Again, you're going to look at your search score. You reveal that many cards from the happening deck, so 4 in my example, and you're going to have a look whether you have the matching symbol. And I spot a pirate symbol, the mermaid symbol and the Neverland symbol. And the Neverland symbol is a joker. It can be used as any of the any of the symbols. And we needed to find them in the forest. So I have 1 forest with the Neverland symbol, so yes, I find a Lost Boy symbol in the forest. But if I needed something in the mountains, I have no mountain terrain symbol, so then I would have failed my tracking check. But that's basically how the tracking works. You look if you have the right symbol matched with the right terrain type on 1 card. But that's the 4th action you can choose, and the final one is you can challenge. If you are in the same space as another player, you can challenge them, and the same goes for NPCs. You can also challenge NPCs. You can only challenge characters from a different faction. I'm from the Lost Boys, Tiger Lily, she's from the Brave, so we are from different factions, so we can challenge each other. And if you challenge someone, you can either choose to challenge them in speed, strength or intellect. Well, let's have a look. My intellect is 3, Tiger Lily has an intellect of 2, so I'm gonna choose intellect. We both roll a 4-sided die. I roll a 4, I add my 3, so I have a score of 7, versus Tiger Lily's 2 plus 3 is 5, so I'm the winner. And the winner gains 1 victory point and can choose either to steal 1 item of the loser or deal them damage equal to the difference. So 7 minus 5 is a difference of 2, so I deal 2 damage, and because I have a hammer I deal an additional damage. But that's the 5th action you can choose from. But you can choose any action, and you can even choose the same action twice in the same round. But you only have 1 action for yourself, 1 action for an NPC, and then you have a 3rd action which you can either take yourself or give to an NPC. NPCs work in the same way. In this example we have the Jolly Roger, who should be here. You can move the Jolly Roger, which moves 1 plus a 4-sided die. Let's see, that's 4 in total. You don't have to use all your movement points, so I can, for instance, say 1, 2, 3. And if I wanted to be nasty and would not be here, I could use the Jolly Roger to attack Tiger Lily. But the Jolly Roger has a huge cannon which you can exhaust to make a powerful attack. And again, if you have an action to spend on an NPC, you can also rest with the NPC, ready the cannon again, etc, etc. So you actually can use the same actions used for yourself on the NPCs. But those are the options you have during your turn. And when you're done performing all the actions you wanted to do, you don't even have to do all the actions you have available. The next player continues to their upkeep phase and then their action, their adventure phase. And so play continues until this side quest deck runs out. When a player finishes their story, so there is going to be a card that tells you that you're at the end of your story, immediately take the top 4 cards of the side quest deck and put them in the discard pile. This accelerates the end game. And again, when this pile is empty, or when both players, in my 2-player example, have finished their storyline, the game is over. And we're going to have a look at the adventure track, and the one with the most adventure points is the winner. But there's one more thing you should know. You see 4 scores which are bold, and whenever your scoring marker enters that square or passes over it, you get an upgrade. And when you upgrade, you have a choice of 4 different options. First of all, you have 2 special abilities which you can unlock, and you can upgrade your skills. Normally you have a 4-sided die and you add your skill value, but you can upgrade that to a 6-sided die. So from now on you will roll a 6-sided die and then add your ability score. And the second option you have is you get a reroll. And whenever you use this ability for a challenge, a test, whatever, you may choose to reroll the die. Every time you pass one of these spaces, you get an upgrade on your character. But that's how we adventure through Neverland, and we unravel our own personal story while side questing and encountering all kinds of happenings and other players along the way. And the player with the most adventure points at the end of the game will be the winner of Adventures in Neverland. And that's how the game is played. Adventures in Neverland is a special kind of game. Its main focus is on the adventure. Every character has their own unique adventuring deck, and those adventuring cards, those chapters, they will come together as one big story. All the elements are great. I love the artwork, I love the different ways that certain things are presented. For instance, your character sheet is a small book, you fold it open, it has your stats on one side, room for your items on the other side. And the same goes for the main board. Everything you need is on this board, and that makes it easy to see what's happening. And at the same time, the game mechanics themselves, they're fairly easy, which leaves more room to concentrate on enjoying your personal adventure and listening to the adventures of all the other players. So those 2 things, they strengthen each other. And I also like the freedom of choice you have in this game. When you open your story for the first time, you're immediately presented with 2 options. Either you go A or you go to B, and from there on your adventure starts, and it's going to be branching all over the place, and then again coming together slowly towards the end of your personal story. And that's great, because not only do you make all kinds of different story choices, which makes the story interesting to play through again, and then choose different options and going into different directions, and maybe having a bit more luck of the die, or just trying to go in an entirely different direction. And that's combined with all the other things that happen during the game. The side quests you chose to pursue, the events that were laid out upon the table, the interaction with other players, and not only enjoying your own story, but also listening to what the other players are doing and listening to their stories. It makes for so much fun. I've got memories of every time I've played this game, because there are certain things that happened that left an impression, and due to the way this game works, with all the little stories, with all the things that happen, my imagination just gets boosted and starts going all over the place, which makes the game even more fun to play. And what I also like, if you start moving, the player to your right is holding one of these happening cards very anxiously, hoping you're going to move into one of the terrain types depicted on the left top, so that he can influence your story, and something else happens. And despite the fact that every character has only one story at the moment, the replay value is decent, because at the start of the game you're already faced with the choice go A or go B, and from there you're going to branch all over the place, and again with all the other things happening your story will be different every time, even if you choose to pursue the same route a second time. And all these elements together make Adventures in Neverland a great adventure game. I love the different adventures combined with the great artwork, but what I do appreciate the most is the combination of the adventure system with the game mechanic itself. And the game mechanic itself is, I think, played down a bit to allow the stories to come out more. I mean, when it's your turn you have your upkeep, which is side quest related, and then you have the actions, which are all fairly simple and they play fairly quick. If an action takes more time, it's because it's story based. You have to read a story, you have to make a decision, and that can either be from the happening cards or from your own adventure deck. And the stories in this game are very enjoyable to play through, and I simply love the fact that I make choices, and based upon these choices and what other players do, the story is going to evolve into a certain direction, and that is a lovely thing. And once again, this game leans heavily on the adventuring part, so if you don't like the story based games, this is probably not something for you. But if you like a good story and you want to know more about Peter Pan, Neverland and everything that happens inside there, this is a great game to enjoy that. It plays fairly quickly, it has great adventures to be had, and I love the artwork and the components, and I can't wait to have all the adventures, because in my prototype I don't have every adventure pack, and to start playing all the different characters and find out what their stories are going to be. So I really recommend this game for people who love adventure storytelling games, and that's why I am giving this an 8.
Nox Spellenzolder.